Good morning, my name's Chris. Welcome to my Star Trek reviews of The Next Generation, TNG from now on. We're going to be reviewing every single episode that TNG produced between 87 and 94. That's a lot to get through. That's 176 episodes. Some are two-parters. We're looking at about 170 videos if I just do episodic reviews of all of this lot. Got to start somewhere. Encounter at Farpoint. What a better place to start. We are going to do it chronologically. I mean, some of you are just like me to probably do yesterday's Enterprise, best of both worlds. The ones that are regarded as the best. But no, we're going to do it all. We're going to be methodical about it. Going to be a little bit Vulcan about it. Now we've got a lot of stuff on the screen. I've designed this HUD for you to help you navigate the video, because some of you may not enjoy certain parts of the review process and you just want to skip to maybe the trivia or my personal best bit and maybe the score at the end. You don't care about a review because you know the episodes are really old now and you've all seen them. So I'll keep my actual review bit pretty short. The what the section probably needs explanation. Those are all the bits of an episode which don't actually make much sense when you really think about it, or the science doesn't make sense when you think about it from the previous things they've said in episodes. I've got these wonderful books. I'm going to promote these heavily. If you can get hold of these, they're a brilliant read if you're a fan. By Phil Farrand. He wrote these a long time ago. I don't know if he's done any more, but this is all you need for Star Trek Next Generation. First edition, that's when he just did it with his mates, nitpicking the episodes apart, pointing out all the errors and mistakes, and then he did it again when he got all the letters from the fans who spotted stuff that he'd missed, and he was able to produce another book exactly the same size of all the updated stuff. They're really amazing books. I recommend those. You'll also be seeing all the VHS tapes because that's what I've got them on. The footage you're seeing on the screen is not VHS tape quality. It's taken off the Blu-rays, which are the remastered ones, so the updated special effects. But these are the ones. These are like the original Star Wars. These things. These have got the original effects and the original crappy quality that you get from VHS tape. If it calls for it, I might have to get one of those on the TV screen and just record a bit, because there are some subtle differences between what they did with the remastering. I think in Encounter at Farpoint there's even a part where they beam down the energy beam to the creature on the planet below, and in the original, on the VHS, the beam comes from the captain's yacht in the centre of the saucer section, and they remastered it, and he does tell her to fire it from the phasers, and it comes out of the phasers in the remastered edition. Little things like that, little bits. Interesting. So let's move on. We're going to crack on with the synopsis. You're going to hear about the back of the tape. That's where I'm going to get all my synopsises from. They're much shorter on all the rest of the VHS tapes because it's the first one. Everything's a bit longer. So bear with this episode. It is a bit bloated because it is Encounter at Farpoint and it is my first one. I'm sure, like Encounter at Farpoint, it's a little bit flabby around the edges. Could be a bit shorter, like this review probably. But I'm sure as the seasons go on, I'm going to get far better at this, far more concise, and they're going to really come down in size and be condensed and far more entertaining. I'm just making excuses for this first crap video, to be honest. Anyway, enjoy. Let's move on to the synopsis. Since this is the first time we're looking at one of these VHS tapes, it's worth pointing out that picture on the front of the tape. The artwork of the crew. It's fascinating over the years how that is going to change. It's humorous to say the least. When it's season 2, they've literally added and just drawn on a beard for Commander Riker's face rather than redraw the whole face. Just sketch a beard on. And Troy's hair goes longer, so they literally add hair to that image there. It's really interesting watching that image change over the seasons when Tasha just gets deleted from the back. I imagine the people that did the artwork for this were like, yeah, we've got to put Tasha at the back because we know she dies early season 1. We don't want her being too prominent in the foreground. Maybe surprisingly, Data's stuck at the back of that picture. Ultimately, he'll prove to be either the most popular or second most popular character on the show, and yet he's stuck right at the back, kicking his heels. Maybe to start with, when they did this, they were thinking it would just be the normal kind of crew lineup where the captain was most important, first officer, and then chief medical officer like McCoy was perhaps in the original Star Trek, which is why Dr. Crusher is just off Captain Picard's shoulder. Anyway, let's take a look at the back of the box and read out this synopsis for you and get the lowdown on Encounter at Farpoint. Welcome aboard the new Galaxy-class Starship Enterprise, bigger and better than ever before. In this first feature-length episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, we meet the new crew, explore the new Enterprise, and meet an awesome new adversary, the godlike Q. He sets a challenge to new Captain Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, who must prove to Q that humans are not a grievously savage race. Q sets a proving ground, Farpoint, a planet where an alien creature is threatening the peaceful Bandai. Why? joined Picard, his first officer Riker, Jonathan Frakes, Lieutenant Commander Data, Brent Spiner, depends where you're from, who is an android, and Lieutenant Worf, Michael Dorn, who is a Klingon, with a little exclamation point, in this intriguing opening adventure in space. So this was written by Dorothy Fontana, who was a big influence on the original show, wrote a lot of episodes, and that's who Gene Roddenberry went to write the pilot. And then he's also got a writing credit, as you can see at the bottom of the screen here. He had to step in and sort of flesh it out more to get more content in, but we'll get all of this on the trivia section. Director was Corey Allen. There he is. That guy could grow a beard. Look at that thing. It's flipping awesome. Would you like to grow a beard like that? Anyway, that's a synopsis. Let's move on to the review. So Encounter at Farpoint, you've basically got two stories and kind of the third big character being the Enterprise itself that needs introducing. In terms of the two stories, you've got the Q story and then you've got the Farpoint story. Originally it was just a Farpoint story, and then they had to flesh it out to make it into a 2-hour TV movie, and that's where Q came from. And Gene Roddenberry's always been rather intrigued with having these super powerful beings judging humanity and making us account for ourselves. I think the two stories actually work quite well together, ultimately. They don't, fight against one another for screen time or anything, and towards the end when Q's there at Farpoint and they merge together, it's a fine outcome. So ultimately they did a good job, I think, in everything they needed to do in a pilot episode. Third character, like I said, or third part of the story, is the ship itself and the crew, and they managed to all get their own fair share of screen time and do what they need to do. The direction by Corey Allen is actually pretty consistently good throughout the episode. I can only imagine it's blooming difficult when you're first on a new show with these brand new sets, trying to figure it all out and what you can and cannot do. So you probably do make a lot of mistakes on those initial first few episodes of the series while people are working out what can and cannot be done with certain cameras and angles and so forth. But I think overall he did a good job, and it's a fair looking episode with some interesting camera angles, which I do appreciate. I do like my filmmaking to be done with a little bit of craft, and he certainly delivers in that regard. There is this one howling mistake, though. I think it's a mistake anyway, that is in the courtroom with the out of focus Q judge coming in on the obviously a hydraulic forklift behind him. You can just imagine someone driving in behind with a forklift, and maybe it's on a crane on some sort of dolly, I don't know. But it's so out of focus. I don't know why it's in there. I mean, why couldn't they see it on the dailies to say that's really out of focus? Let's do that again. It looks blimmin' awful. But like I say, it's the pilot. You've got to give it some slack because it is the opening gambit on everyone's part. The acting is, on the whole, terrific actually. Everyone seems to understand their characters right from the outset. I mean, it's the very first episode. You'd think they'd be a little bit not quite on the ball, but Picard, Patrick Stewart absolutely nails Picard right from the offset. A kind of stoic, diplomatic, thoughtful man. Riker's boisterous and heroic, likes to stick his enormous chest out at the screen a lot. And Tasha's a little bit impulsive security. Worf is just a Klingon being a Klingon, and Data's a little bit emotional, really, for someone who's emotionless when he pulls Wesley out of the water. That grin on his face, I mean, holy God, I mean, no emotion? Are you sure? Maybe he's mimicking it, I don't know, but he doesn't seem to do any more of that in the future episodes. Like I said, it's the pilot, you've got to cut him a lot of slack. They're kind of figuring this stuff out. They can watch it when it's finished and think, no, we've got to change that. That's not going to be... we can't sustain that. If we can't say he's got no emotion, he's got to come off as having no emotion. So no more broad grinning from ear to ear. And likewise with Troy's character, they did an awful lot of close-ups of Troy's face, pulling some really interesting... it was almost gurning, almost. It's distracting, to say the least. So thankfully they knocked that on the head. I think Marina Sirtis also said she was not happy with how she portrayed Troy in that pilot episode, and everything got changed from there on in. So overall, I mean, it's a good episode. It's not as bad as you probably remember, because it's now 30 years old and you can watch it with a little bit of nostalgia attached to it. So I think it's actually standing the test of time better than you think it is, especially with the updated special effects. The wide aerial shots of Farpoint, the old Bandy City, they look terrific now they've been updated. And there's not an awful lot you can point your finger at and say, I wish they hadn't done that. it's not bad. So overall, it's pretty good, and you'll see where it goes on the scoreboard in a few minutes. Let's move on to my best bit of the episode. So my nomination for the best bit of this episode is Riker docking the star drive section to the saucer section. And it is laughable how he achieves this amazing feat of flight and navigation with just a couple of words, it seems. This whole scene starts with the ready room off the battle bridge, and we're treated to a bit of 80s nostalgia here. You check this out. Look at that down there in the bottom right hand corner. That is a Firefox console. I'll put it up on the screen next to it and probably pause it there for a moment so you can see it. I thought I'd show this budget. They had enough. You see behind Captain Picard in that little scene, they've got one of the typical Next Generation monitors, and that they designed for the show. I'm not going to why don't they put another one just to its side? Why have they put a Firefox there? I don't get that. Maybe Captain Picard likes playing Firefox. Can only assume as much as that. So then Riker goes to the bridge, and very fortunately the saucer section is already at a pretty good angle. It's pretty close to the star drive section, and so
velocity to 1/2 meter per second.
He's going to eyeball this. He's just going to look at the screen and go, yeah, -3 degrees on the pitch.
Adjust pitch angle, -3 degrees.
Yep, and we'll just make that subtle adjustment for you, sir. And then what's happening now is the star drive section is coming in at a rotating angle, and he just tells O'Brien to watch his roll angle. O'Brien doesn't get a name yet, and so now it's just subtly coming around. I guess he's twisted the chassis of the star drive section just a little bit. Have you ever tried to put together one of those GU10 light bulb fittings with two little prongs, as pictures on the screen, and a little female receiver upside down in the light socket, which is kind of what he's trying to do, except
Prepare for reconnection.
there's about 12 connection points that have all got to line up just so. It has absolutely got to be bang on, this thing. And he just eyeballs it. It's like -3 degrees, adjust your roll a little bit there, inertia will do the rest. And it just...
to station keeping. All velocity 0.
There are light fittings above my head that I've tried putting in when I've taken a good excuse me, a minute or two to actually get the damn bulb in. And it's only 2 fittings. And it just click. He hasn't given commands yet to get the Enterprise underneath the saucer section and kind of bring it up and connect. It just goes in. Next time I need the bulb changing, Commander Riker, I'm calling you around. You can do a manual docking on one of my light bulbs. Because they're not as easy as they look. That is the best bit in Counter at Farpoint. Commander Riker. Sets himself up for the entire 7-season run right there. Brilliant. So the original script, it was only for an hour-long episode, and the original outline had the alien creature being kept in orbit around the planet, and the inhabitants of the planet, called the Anoi, not the Bandai, were a simian race, and they'd enclosed the creature inside a gun platform, and it's, imagine like the Death Star or something like that. I'm doing a doodle of it now on the screen. How it might have looked, I've got no idea. But the Enterprise was going to turn up with another starship called the USS Starseeker, which would subsequently be destroyed by the gun platform, and the Anoi trying to force the remaining crews to go down to the surface and become miners for the mineral that the creature requires to survive, which is probably why the creature was there in the first place. A slightly more action-orientated script, apparently, and it would have been quite exciting to see that, because it does sound like a rather nice idea, having this alien creature forced to be a super weapon in orbit. Ultimately, it didn't turn out that way, but that was one of the early drafts. How big is the Enterprise? Well, that would be a question that probably most of the writers need to understand when they're writing stuff for the show, and they designed a little picture to give everyone the idea of scale. I've mimicked it here. It's not the actual picture, but this is the same proportions, and they put an overlay of the Enterprise over the Paramount Studios lot, so everyone understood how big it was, because it does actually fit pretty nicely, cleanly over the entire lot. So the writers could just walk out their office and just look outside and think, yeah, so it's about this big. If I zoom in on the little car park, you'll see how small the cars are next to a warp nacelle, and that gave everyone a good idea of just how enormous this vessel was. So speaking of the Enterprise D, take a look at this picture from the courtroom scene in Encounter at Farpoint. Does anyone strike you as important, or maybe shouldn't be there, or unusual. Well, it's this guy here. That's Andrew Probert. He's the guy who designed the Enterprise D as we know it, and what an amazing job he did. The sketch was sitting on his desk, and one of the producers came in and saw it, said, "What's this?" And he said, "It's just some ideas." He took it to Gene Roddenberry, and he was like, "Yep, that is now the Enterprise D," and that is what he came up with. So big tip of the triple hat to Andrew Probert for coming up with this one. It's the best looking Enterprise we've ever had, I think, personally. And here's something they do a lot of in Star Trek shows: reuse old sets. That's the transporter room on the left of the Klingon bird of prey in Voyage Home, and they just flipped it upside down to make the part of the office wall for Zorn's office in the Bandai City. This is a copy of the casting call that went out to talent agencies asking for a Captain Picard. Captain Julian Picard, a Caucasian man in his 50s who is very youthful and in prime physical condition. Born in Paris, his Gaelic accent appears when deep emotions are triggered. He is definitely a romantic and believes strongly in concepts like honour and duty. Captain Picard commands the Enterprise. He should have a mid-Atlantic accent and a wonderfully rich speaking voice. So let's do a few nits, shall we? Some of these are... what the... They're separating the saucer section at warp 9.6 something or other. When Picard speculates about doing this, Data says it's not advisable at any warp speed. So he's like, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it at warp 9.6, the absolute maximum speed. And it all seems to go really, really smoothly. Then they do something really weird with the camera angles in this. They separate, as you can see now, and the saucer section moves away. I suppose that's believable. You can see the stars are warping on the screen. And the warp field is enveloping the saucer section. Then it cuts to a really weird camera angle where the stars are stationary in the background and the Enterprise commits this incredibly tight turn. See, stars are still warping, and I think it's coming up any second. Here we go. So off goes the saucer section at what looks like a sublight speed all of a sudden. The Enterprise does this 180 turn on the spot, and then appears to be back at warp speed again. There, what's going on with that? I don't understand that sequence at all. It doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. Then we get another nit rolling on straight from this. We're on the bridge, we've got Tasha. She's human. We've got Captain Picard. He's human. We've got Chief O'Brien. He's human. And we got Councillor Troy. She's half human. And we got Data, an android who happened to be built by humans. So Q's going to put us on trial for crimes against humanity. Prove that we're not a grievously savage race. So who does he take to this courtroom trial? Does he take Picard, Troy, Tasha, and the Chief? No, he takes the three people just mentioned, and Data. Data's not even human. How can he answer for the crimes of his supposed race when it's not even really his race because we made him? What's Chief O'Brien? He's just sat there. He's like, well, he's a 100% human being. Good grief, take him. Doesn't really make much sense either.
We should look for some way to distract.
That's the whole point. Anyway, moving on. So this next one is a kind of production problem. It's how do you get an actress to kick a man in the face, or however she kicks him, and do it with a stunt lady? They can do it with a stunt lady apparently, so they have to use a man. So I'll enlarge this when it happens, and you'll see this awful wig that they put on this male stuntman to do the action of kicking this guard. That's bad, man. It's like it's just stuck on his head. This thing, it's like a tribble stuck on his head from earlier. Welcome to the Galactic Scoreboard. Now, this is how we're going to rate all these episodes, or how I'm going to rate them. Personal choice. This is my channel, my reviews. This is how I want to rate them. If I zoom in a little bit, there's Encounter at Farpoint, right in the centre of this celestial gathering of stars. And you can see I've divided it into three sections. Season 1 is going to be in white, and they can either be put up towards the action section at the top, mystery in the bottom left, or romance in the bottom right. I think, having looked at lots of different episodes, they can all be categorised into those areas. So Encounter at Farpoint. Let's nudge it this way. It's definitely a mystery show with a bit of action. Obviously, if I had more romance, I'll be looking down over here somewhere and going towards the romance side of things within mystery, but we're going up towards the action because there's plenty of fighting and stuff. Neutral zone is kind of good. It's a good place to be. You're just, you know, kind of set fair, and as I said during my review, Encounter at Farpoint is not that bad actually. So I'm going to put it right on the edge of the neutral zone up towards the action. That is where Encounter at Farpoint is going to sit in my galactic map. This is going to get much more interesting as more episodes get added. It's going to be, I think, fairly straightforward then to sort of judge episodes against one another by just positioning them on the map in accordance to these kind of outlines. So there we go, that's the first one, and that just leaves our conclusion. So that concludes my first review of a Star Trek TNG episode Encounter at Farpoint. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you liked the format. Please let me know below what you thought. At this early stage, feedback is important because nothing is beyond changing, even though I'd be loath to change any of this stuff right now. It's taken ages to make all that. Next week should be The Naked Now, which will be the next episode. I'm doing it chronologically like I said, so there's some interesting stuff in that episode that needs to be gone over with, a fine-tooth comb, and I'm looking forward to doing the what the about that one, because there are some weird things going on in that show. Subscribe, like, please, that's how you let us YouTubers know that you're enjoying the content, so don't be shy, and of course leave comments below. Thanks ever so much, I hope you enjoyed it. My name's Chris, and I will see you next week. Take care, bye bye.